This segment of the news is brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.
Welcome back. In the House of Assembly on Wednesday, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest shared the government's borrowing activities for the fiscal year 2020-2021. Mr. Turnquest says during the beginning of the fiscal year, after examining the available funding options, the government sourced $140 million in short-term advances from Central Bank and thus far has repaid $30 million.
Commercial market loans. In August, the government executed a $300 million bridge facility obtained from several high-profile global investors, but only drew down $248 million of the loan, borrowing from IFIs, or International Financial Institutions. Consistent with our plan, the government has sought to maximize opportunity for financing from international financial institutions like the Caribbean Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and other bilateral alternatives. There are more concessionary lending terms in lower interest rates and longer maturity time frames, reduce debt costs and risk relative to commercial credits, which carry higher interest costs and shorter maturity.
Turnquest also says the government has engaged in commercial market loans and borrowing from the international financial institutions as short-term financial activities and explained their roles.
One of the things that this administration has done since taking office through the Treasury Department is to develop monthly cash flow projections based on how it perceives the evolution of revenue performance and the timing of its outlays. A funding plan was devised to match the cash flow projection needs, and both projections have been updated on an ongoing basis to ensure that there are sufficient funds available to meet the government's budgetary requirements.
Turnquest says it is important to note that loans from these IFIs are typically associated with supporting policy reforms or capital investments, therefore will take a longer time to structure and close than the traditional commercial loans. In news from the crime front, police here in the capital investigating a police-involved shooting last night that leaves a man in hospital today nursing his injuries. According to Assistant Superintendent of Police Audley Peters, shortly before 8 p.m., police responded to a house breaking in progress on St. Charles Vincent Street, south of Balfour Avenue. On the officers' arrival, they surveyed the premises and heard the sound of movement coming from the northern section of the building. With their service weapons drawn, the officers identified themselves and beckoned the suspect to exit the building. Police say the movement continued after several demands. Then one of the officers observed a figure exiting the door of the building with what appeared to be a silver object pointed in their direction. The officers then discharged their firearm in the direction of the suspect, who was then incapacitated. The officers then discovered that the suspect was an adult male. They recovered a knife from him. He was later transported to hospital via emergency medical services, where he is listed in stable condition. Investigation into this matter continues. Since the arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic in March, with lockdowns and curfews in place, cases of verbal and physical abuse have increased, leaving many Bahamians experiencing struggles and trauma affecting their mental health. Noted psychiatrist Dr. David Allen says although there are no official figures of the mental health cases in the Bahamas, there has been an increase in anxiety, depression, and anger, which leads to panic.
But there's no doubt that this COVID pandemic has had a powerful effect on mental health. The major thing being increased depression, increased anxiety, increased panic attacks, and also increased alcoholism. And in some cases, people are using a lot of alcohol plus a lot of marijuana. So as a result of that, you say things that are abusive, you do things which hurt yourself and hurt others.
Since major hotels across the country have chosen to reduce staff or even close their doors completely, it's believed that this has all taken a big toll mentally on many of those furloughed workers. Dr. Allen says people are definitely suffering, experiencing tremendous financial sufferings in particular, as Hurricane Dorian was massive, and now with the pandemic, people are afraid and anxious.
Men tend to get their self-esteem from their work. Women, of course, their work, but also their relationships. So a lot of men to work like the hotel are scared and afraid, but men find it harder to express fear. So they go to anger instead. Women can feel more anxiety, but they have more connection with other women, so therefore they feel more supported. But it's really had a tremendous toll on us, and I guess it'll take a while for us to understand all the ramifications.
Dr. Allen says despite not having the figures, he believes this is all having a powerful effect on all of us, children, parents, churches, and even the government. Dr. Allen contends that these are very scary times for all Bahamians, but says love and gratitude always blocks anger and anxiety. Stay with us.
This segment of the news has been brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.